Alright, so we are back for another Dokkan battle video, and in today's video, we're going to be doing something just a little bit different. Dokkan is a little dry right now. We're just kind of waiting for Omega Shenron and all of his content to release for part 2 of the thank you celebration. So as we're waiting, I figured we could do some more random videos. I say random, but it does kind of apply to, I guess, the current celebration because we are going to be talking about Omega Shenron. But I wanted to dedicate a video to talking about why most releases as of recently have been so mid. Now, of course, a lot of units have still been good. I think a good example of this was the latest Dokkan Fest on JP with the Piccolo and Gohan and then the banner unit Vegeta and Nappa. Both of them were very good. Piccolo and Gohan are an amazing support. They're on some really weak teams and they're supporting the really weak teams. And then also once you get the exchange into Gohan, I mean, this guy's just insane, right? There's really nothing to complain about. So definitely a very good unit with him. I'd say other than his link set, he's just a W all around, to be honest. And then the Vegeta and Nappa, everything is great about them, but their card art. They did Vegeta so dirty. Look how tiny he looks here. He looks like a little kid. I feel kind of bad for him. But other than the card art, this was a really good release. And especially for Extreme Class teams, this kind of threw me off guard, I'm going to be honest. Or I say Extreme Class teams, really just, you know, these Extreme Class units, they usually fumble. So then seeing a guy like this have 30% damage reduction, have guard, get defense on super, get all these stats in his kit, makes me actually have hope for Extreme Class teams in the future. But unfortunately, the past couple months has, I guess, showed otherwise, because a lot of these Extreme Class releases, a lot of these Extreme Class EZAs, all that, have been very bad. So I figured, again, we could just dedicate a video to talking about why these units suck and how Dokkan can maybe try and avoid this going forward. So first off, you know, I already mentioned him. We got the Carnival LR Omega Shenron. We can just talk about why he's so bad. I mean, honestly, I guess it's pretty simple. I was thinking for a second, like, what I will talk about, but his teams just suck. I mean, GT Bosses is really bad, and unfortunately, this guy is restricted to that category, which is another thing we got to talk about, because that's the main reason why these Extreme Class teams suck, because every Extreme Class release we get is heavily restricted. Restricting a unit to a category is never really a good thing. I think there's some circumstances where it's okay. Maybe if a unit is, like, amazing on a certain category, and the category sucks and desperately needed the help, I think most players can get past that. But when we have a release like Omega Shenron, who is good if you have a full GT Bosses team, but not like insane. I mean, he can get up to 50% damage reduction because he gets 30% if you have a full GT Bosses team, and then he gets another 7% damage reduction per Rainbow Key Sphere obtained, which you're going to get like 2 or 3 Rainbow Orbs with him per turn because he has Rainbow Orb changing. So let's just say you're going to get around 50% damage reduction. So with that, and his reasonably high defensive stat, I say that with like quotations, it's not insanely high, but it can be alright. Then defensively, he's not going to be horrible, especially because he gets defense on super, but I don't know, man. I think this guy should have been way better. Like I said, if you're going to restrict a unit to a team, make them very, very good on that team. I'm talking like, you know, top 10 units in the game. Just because they're really good on that team, it doesn't make them the top 10 units on the game, but make them seem like, you know, in that range of power if they're on a full GT Bosses team or whatever team they're restricted to. And being restricted to a team, never a good thing. It's why so many people want the up-and-coming Dragon Ball Heroes units to not be restricted on Dragon Ball Heroes or crossover, because if they're restricted to those categories, then it just makes them a lot more wonkier. I mean, especially with Dragon Ball Heroes, the characters, how do I say this? They're just so obscure, right? Like, you got Limit Breaker Super Saiyan 4 Broly, you've got Dark Fu, you've got Mira, Toa, Limit Breaker Super Saiyan 4 Vegito, you got a fusion between Trunks and Vegeta. Like, you got some of the most random stuff. So them being on all those crazy categories, some really bad, some really good, means that if they're not restricted to the Dragon Ball Heroes team, they could be very useful for those teams and just be really good additions to anyone's box, to be honest. So when a unit is restricted to a team, it does make them a lot less impressive. And unfortunately, Omega is restricted to a team, and the team sucks. And he's not really amazing when he's got a full GT Bosses team, which isn't a good thing because, I mean, dude, the categories this guy's on. He's not on that many, but, you know, Shadow Dragon Saga, Full Power, Inhuman Deeds, Power Absorption, Powerful Comeback, GT Bosses. All of those teams could have desperately used just really good units. And I guess GT Bosses did kind of get some help with him, but it needed more. This guy just needed to be straight up better if they wanted to make him restricted to this team. But regardless, he's still a solid unit. I definitely don't summon for him. I'm only mentioning that because he's coming out on Global soon. I mean, if you want to summon for a banner, just wait till Heroes, see if they're restricted to the Heroes or crossover team. If they are, skip it. If they aren't, maybe summon a little and then maybe try and save for either New Year's or maybe like 9th year anniversary. But yeah, this guy, not good enough. I think they should have just made him better, give him more stats start of turn, and maybe just make this damage reduction just free. Like, give him 30% damage reduction start of turn regardless. And then I think he's golden, because then at that point, he's helping all of these teams, not just GT bosses. But anyway, moving on from Omega Shenron, we talked about him for a while. We got LR Ribrianne. I mean, yeah, Ribrianne, very simple, just not good enough, right? She's a good orb changer. She can do some good damage. And then that's about it. I mean, she's got the giant form, which can be pretty useful, but it's only for a turn or two, so it's not insane. I mean, you could do some good damage, but damage isn't what we're worried about with her. Like I said, defensively, dude, she's struggling. This girl is going to be very, very, very much a liability on your team. She's going to be taking a lot of damage just because defensively she's not good enough. And unfortunately, in events right now, let me say it like this. You can be good defensively and really bad offensively and still be an amazing unit in the game. But if a unit is really good offensively and really bad defensively, then you suck. You're horrible. You have no use in the game. Maybe you're good for like World Tournament. Maybe you're good for the punching bag event and some of these other random events where you need to do a lot of damage. But in terms of actual content that gets you the best rewards and that is difficult, a unit like this is just not good enough, because defensively, like I said, she absolutely sucks. She has this 22% damage reduction, which is, I mean, it's kind of a joke, to be honest, because her defensive stat is just not high enough. If you're around 1,000,000 defense, then 22% damage reduction really isn't that bad. But unfortunately, she's not around 1,000,000 defense. So I think a really easy fix with her, a lot of people say this, it would have just been giving her 66% damage reduction, because she already gets the 22% chance to crit up to 66% every time the character obtains 2 or more key spheres. Obviously, as you can see, she is orb changing a lot. So if they just made this 22% crit chance and damage reduction, then I think it would have made her a lot better. It's not to say, you know, LR Ribrianne's completely useless. She does have some use, I guess. She's on some really weak teams. You know, Peppy Gal, Special Pose, Giant Form. Oh my god, this category sucks. Universe Survival Saga, Tournament Participants. All those teams, well, some better than others. But, you know, Peppy Gal, Special Pose, and then I guess like Giant Form really sucks. So even a unit like this, who's not restricted to a team, is still really good, even though she does have some restrictions in her kit. But it's not like Omega, where it's very important you get these restrictions off. You could probably run her without a Universe Survival Saga category ally, and she's going to look the same for the most part. You're missing out on a little bit of defense from the additional that she gets, but it's not that big of a deal. So she's still going to be somewhat good on every team that she has, but I say that very, like I say with quotations again, because defensively, she's just not good enough. Like I said, damage reduction would have been nice for her. Maybe some guard also for the first couple turns, because the more the merrier. So it's not like anything like that would make her worse. But yeah, she just needed to be better. I mean, I think defensively she sucks, and that's her main issue. And like I said, defense is very important. So the next unit, we've got the Banny unit. Yeah, okay, these guys. So they suck. They just need to be better. I mean, very simple. They are restricted to a Power of Wishes and Tournament Participants category team, which isn't that big of a deal. Like I said, if you make them very good on those teams, then I think them being restricted to those teams can be a good thing, especially if they're weak teams. But this guy is getting no defense on Super. He doesn't have any technique in his kit. By that, I mean guard, damage reduction, dodge. So he's just not going to be good enough, right? Very simple. And then next up, we do have the STR Jaren. So STR Jaren, I got to be honest, he's not like any of these other units we've talked about. His main issue is just the way they designed him, which I know, like, yeah, no shit, that's the way they designed him was bad. But they made him a Super Battle Road unit. So Super Battle Road units are not good in this meta whatsoever. You could kind of run them if you've got type advantage in a difficult event. Let's say you're taking on Red Zone Metal Cooler Core. You want to bring STR Jaren, you could definitely get away with that. But other than an event where you have type advantage, yeah, not good enough, because he does have these restrictions. Now, the restrictions are for how many enemies you're facing. So, for example, you do get this 30% damage reduction when facing 2 or more enemies. In Super Battle Road, in Extreme Super Battle Road, that's going to be amazing, because this guy is going to be at a pretty high defensive stat with 30% damage reduction. Also, this guy is getting 50% defense on Super, so of course that's really good. If you get any additionals, then your defensive stat's going to get even crazier. If you're facing Universe Survival Saga or Tournament Participants category enemy, you get this extra 111% attack and defense, which of course is very good. So you could see there's a lot of good things in this guy's kit, but the restrictions, man, it's just not good enough. He's a Super Battle Road unit, so you need to be facing a certain amount of enemies to get the 30% damage reduction. Most events, you're only facing 1 enemy, so that's not that great. And then also, you need to be facing a Universe Survival Saga or Tournament Participants category enemy to get this. This is really important. This is going to be the difference between, 500, 600k defense after you super to like probably closer to 1,000,000. And then 1,000,000 defense within this 30% damage reduction. This guy's looking really impressive, especially with everything else he's got going on in his kit. But unfortunately, there's so many restrictions in the way of all that it makes it very difficult to get. And at that point, you just don't want to even run him. You'd rather just run another unit that would be better, which is unfortunate because on his teams, there's not a lot of better options than this guy. I mean, Realm of Gods is pretty good. We talked about this earlier. It should be better than it is, but I guess it's pretty alright, especially if you're running Extreme Class because you got all the Zamasus. Super Class, of course, you've got a lot of the Blues and the Super Saiyan Gods, but it's still not like amazing. And then I guess Universe Survival Saga, we're going to get buffs for that soon, but right now it does kind of suck. Universe 11 is horrible. I don't think that's ever going to be good. Space Traveling Warrior is pretty good. Defenders of Justice absolutely sucks. And then Tournament Participants is pretty decent. But what I'm trying to say is, like, Defenders of Justice, Universe 11 could have massively benefited from this guy being just really good. But unfortunately, because he's a Super Battle Road unit, because he's got these restrictions to the enemy you're facing, it's just not that fun to run him, because then you got to go through all these hoops. And even with that, I feel like his use is so limited. So not a big fan of this Jaren. And I think an easy fix would have just been removing the restrictions. I mean, you could see a trend here. I'm basically just saying remove restrictions or double down on them and make him absolutely busted with the restrictions, which this guy unfortunately isn't. So it's kind of a lose-lose, right? And then next up, I guess finally I should say, we got the Transforming Goku Black. All right, Transforming Goku Black is a little different than everyone. He's good once you get going with him. I've heard a lot of people talk about how he's a little underrated. He's actually a really good unit once you get a couple stacks in with him. Not saying you're wrong. I'm sure if you get a couple stacks in with him, you get to build up with him a little. I'm sure he's going to be a very useful unit, especially because he has a lot of built-in additionals. So you can get up to, I think, 4 supers in a turn. And he's greatly stacking defense. So, you're getting a lot of defense if you get really lucky with additionals. But it doesn't really matter. You can't argue against the fact that he is absolute ass for the first couple turns. If you don't get those stacks, if you get unlucky with key, if you get unlucky with additionals, this guy is going to suck defensively. It is what it is, right? This guy needs his stacks, and without them, he is horrible. So I think a good fix for him would have just been giving him guard for the first couple turns, giving him maybe dodge, some damage reduction, anything like that. Because events right now, I mean, we're in that era where they're starting to hit over 2 million. So if they're hitting for over 2 million, their first phase, because most events have a couple phases, their first phase is still going to hit for over 1 million. So when this guy's at 200k defense on turn 1, and that's being generous, thinking you have all of these links activated. But if he's at like 200k defense and you get hit for 1 million, you're taking 800k from a super. And even normals are still going to do like, 100 to 200k damage to this guy. So that's what I'm trying to say. This guy is not good enough for the first couple turns. He needed some sort of technique. He needed some sort of something for the first couple turns, because all you're relying on for this guy to be good defensively is his stacks. Which, like I said, if you get those, he's good. But that's a very big if. If you get those, he's good. If you don't, you're going to take like 800k from a super, if not, even more. So you got to be very careful when running this guy, unfortunately, because they didn't really want to make him amazing for the first couple turns, which, I mean, they do that with some other units too. I know a lot of stacking units are struggling with that right now. I mean, a good fix would just be guard for the first couple turns, so then maybe they'll take a little bit of damage, but it still does give them the opportunity to stack up. And then obviously you lose the guard, but that's fine because you've stacked up a lot of defense. So then you can actually just kind of get going with them. So I guess that pretty much has been the video. If you guys like any of the units I talked about, that's fine. That's not to say these guys have no use whatsoever. Like I said, Omega can be pretty good on a GT Boss's team. LR Ribrianne can be pretty good on Peppy Gal's. Giant Form, I know those are really bad teams. And her having a Giant Form is still pretty good. I do want to specify that. And then obviously this guy, well, I don't think there's anything good to say about them. But like, Jaren is a good Super Battle Road unit. This guy's good for long events. So there is use with these units, but I think a lot of people can agree they could have been a lot better. And the main issue, I would say, maybe not with this guy, because this guy he's just not good enough for the first couple turns. But I would say the main issue with a lot of these units is restrictions. They're just not good enough, and their restrictions really suck. I guess Ribrianne doesn't really fall into that category either, because of course, she doesn't really have any restrictions that make her like really good on a certain team. But she's just not good enough, right? So once again, that has been the video. Let me know what you guys are thinking of this video, and if I was incorrect, maybe was I too harsh on some of these guys? Did I go too easy on some of them? And also let me know what was the most disappointing release over the past year. And yeah, it has been the video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll catch y'all in the next one.